So today, what I would want to share with you is more, I guess, a personal experience that I've had over almost 20 years working in human resources. As Bobby said, I started my career in Roche in the UK. Roche is a large pharmaceutical company, has 88,000 people globally across 40 countries. I started really my career just as a curiosity of how I could use my curiosity of connecting people and connecting people and business. So as you saw, my degree is in American Studies and English Literature. What the heck am I going to do with that? I either teach, or in the UK we used to say you go into personnel. That'll work. Tea and sympathy. My job is not tea and sympathy, thank goodness. But honestly, the transformation that I've seen both from my own organization but also across industry and wider has been quite phenomenal, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years. And so I wanted to share with you some insights that I have, share some stories that I have seen as a head of HR. Some I won't share with you, but maybe we can talk afterwards about some of the others. And just give you a perspective as future leaders of organizations that actually you've played the most critical role in helping people speak up, or otherwise they're going to shut up. So we also know that there is a huge...
Technology is never my good spot, though. We also know there is a huge correlation between how people engage and how they feel included and the business results that we will get. And that's nothing new, I think, for anybody in this room, or I hope it's nothing new because it's not something that, is a surprise. Hey, if you like what you're doing, I think you're going to commit, you're going to do a good job, and you're going to actually, want the best for the company that you work for and take things to the next level. And what I really feel passionate about is if you don't get people to share ideas, and they just share problems, then innovation is stifled in your own organization. So we have, statistically in general, you have about over half, 56% of the population of an organization who feel uncomfortable speaking up. And the most thing that they feel uncomfortable speaking up about is not about, hey, I've got a problem here, or my pay's not good enough, or I don't like my desk, or, my manager's not very good. They don't speak up about creative ideas, they don't speak up about innovation, and they don't help bring solutions to problems. If you have over half of your business population who won't do that, then you won't be successful. So what I want to share with you is just ways in which my organization and other organizations try to address that, and how you as leaders might want to think about that in the future, and just share some learnings and stories that I've had. Oh, for goodness sake. Try again. Large organizations tend to have chief diversity officers. Roche doesn't have a chief diversity officer. What we believe is that actually leaders are the key to diversity and inclusion. But what we do is we have some tools in place that help us understand how our organization is feeling and how engaged they are. Because we know that engagement brings out the opportunity for people to speak up and bring innovation. And what I want to share with you is this is actually a global employee opinion survey. Rui actually was our lead for GEOS in 2017. And we've done it since 2011. And we asked some very specific questions in our global employee opinion survey about speaking up. And you can see some of them here. Because a lot about speaking up is about how safe do I feel? What's my psychological safety to speaking up? What is going to happen if I speak up? And one of the things that is really important is you ask people for information, you ask people for feedback, you need to act on it. But let me share with you a couple of the questions. So it's safe for me to speak up and share my views in my team. In general, how comfortable on a scale of, maybe show of hands, if you think about the team you work with or your colleagues you know more closely or your friends or whatever, how comfortable do you think people are to speak up and express their views? Raise your hand if you think it's fairly comfortable to express your views with people you know well. All right. So from our perspective and the feedback we have from our organization, 72% of our population said they were happy to do that. So show of hands, that's probably representative of what we saw today. What about when it gets a bit more serious? Senior management. Who the heck's senior management? Me, allegedly. Those two will tell you I'm not the typical vice president, okay? But is it safe for me to speak up and express my views to senior management? Because as a senior manager, if I don't know what people are thinking, I'm not going to be able to represent those views and opinions when I go into a difficult conversation or I need to make some decisions. So in terms of a show of hands, again, I know this is not scientific, but if you think, if you would feel safe to speak up in front of senior management, put yourself in somebody's shoes, how many of you would feel comfortable doing that? Okay, so a few less. So actually in our organization, we have probably over half or just under half our population who is not feeling safe to speak up to senior management. So 51% of our population don't feel safe speaking up to senior management. That's a big population, right? We have 88,000 people. If 40,000 people are not sure that it's safe to speak up and express their views to senior managers, and we're a pretty nice company, that's a big topic that our organization needs to tackle, and we do. The other one is about being openness and accepting diversity and individual differences of colleagues. And this was the last two questions we put in were very specifically included in the last 5 years as we've got deeper into diversity and inclusion in Roche. It's not that we never thought about it before, but we really wanted to make it a top priority and a priority for our whole organization. So thinking about our work environment, actually, the environment in which we've created, people do feel that we represent or they can be open and we accept individual differences. So 74% of our population feel comfortable, which is great. But 51% of them won't speak up. So you see, it's this balance of, hey, we can get people comfortable, and we did a lot of work on that, but they're still not telling us what they need to tell us and bringing innovation. So how do we help them speak up, not shut up? I think from the last situation as well, so valuing diversity and our organization, I can personally say, having been at Roche for over 19 years now, I started when I was very young, over 75% of our population do feel that we value diversity. So in an organization like that, you sometimes scratch your head and say, what is it that's going to make the difference? How can I, as an individual leader, do something differently? And I think overall, you can see our organization is pretty engaged, but still there's a challenge. So I want to share with you some ideas about, or just get us to think about why people don't speak up. I'm just going to ask my colleagues over there. So Rui and Frank, any ideas why people don't speak up?
Fear of repercussions.
Anybody disagree with that one? Anything else? Be creative, Rui. Get in the moment.
I stole your answer.
Yeah, it was my
Sorry.
maybe the perception that you're always complaining.
Yep. Moaning.
Yeah, you're
Cheese,
always complaining.
Rui's moaning again.
Solutions forward thinker.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Any other reasons why you don't think people speak up? Yes.
Sometimes there's self-doubt, like everybody else seems to be coping, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Good one.
Fear of judgment.
Yeah. Totally. Any others? I'm not looking for a list of 100, but yeah.
No one's going to do anything about it.
Nobody's going to do anything about it. What's the point? I love this group. Good job, Gandhi. Yeah, a lot of those things are things that we hear every day. And honestly, in the last 12 months in Roche, in Ventana, we've been hearing a lot of this. And it's generally driven when your organization has some crisis. And unfortunately for us, we have some quality issues in our instruments at the moment we're dealing with. And the biggest thing is we need to help people speak up. But, they don't speak up because they don't want to be seen as moaning. Thanks, Rui. They don't want to criticize somebody. I don't know exactly if it's the right thing and I don't have the right evidence and it's not perfect, and oh my God, if I say it, somebody's going to say that it's not right. The boss's boss is around. I hate this stuff, by the way. You know, I don't want to lose face and I don't want to be retaliated against. And I would say your answer at the back was perfect. Nobody's going to do anything about it, and I've done it so often that, you know, I've spoken up so many times before, I'm just tired of speaking up. So one of the things I thought might be helpful is to say, well, how would I suggest if I was coaching somebody they might want to look at it? It takes courage to speak up, don't get me wrong, but here's some ideas about how you might do it. So stick to the facts. Don't get emotional. I think it's the hardest thing to do when you get into a frustrating situation because I can tell you, we had a leadership team meeting just yesterday, and I will give you an example. I have a very senior leader who's sitting in that team, and I'm sitting across from them, and we're having a presentation, and they're looking at me going, and I'm like, speak up, what's the matter? You know, and it's just like, we have this innate inability to say, well, you know, I've got something to say, but I'm not sure if I can say it. And so, you know, he as a senior leader is sitting there going, like, criticizing through his language the people who are trying to present in the room. So it's either, for me, is either say something, keep it fact-based, but say something, because you sitting there going, when you're presenting in the front of the room, is really off-putting, right? Am I doing something wrong? Did I say something wrong? You know, do you not like what I'm saying? And if we want to encourage diverse views and opinions and things like that, we have to keep it factual and we have to keep it non-emotional. What Rui said before, bring solutions. That's my one big ask of people when they say, hey, I'm not going to speak up anymore. And it's like, well, haven't you got an idea that you could help us understand how we could solve it? And the biggest conversation I have with leaders is, but they're just moaning. And I said, so how are you encouraging them to think about what solutions do they have? Because I bet the people who are bringing the problems have ideas about how they might solve them. And remember, the more ideas we have, the more diverse the thinking, the better solution we're probably going to get in the long run, and the quicker that people will buy in. Because if they're told, hey, do this because I know this is the answer, I'm not going to do it. I prefer to say, hey, I've thought about this over the last 3 weeks. It's keeping me up at night, and here's what I think we should do. So you have to create the environment of a leader, as a leader, to have people do that. That's challenging. That's challenging. Have a crucial conversation. I'm going to give Frank a plug. He does great crucial conversation training. But it's like, what questions would you ask? How would you coach somebody to speak up? What questions would you ask? And I have some ideas about that. When you say to somebody, it has to be perfect, then you're going to absolutely prevent somebody giving you an idea. And I'll talk to you a little bit in a couple of moments about agility. You guys heard about agility? You all practice agility, right? Scrums and sprints and blah, blah, blah. Software space come into the business world and we're like, yeah, we don't really know what we're talking about when we're trying. But agility is really important. Agility is about being not perfect. And large organizations love to be perfect. And I have somebody in my team who personally says, I really don't speak up sometimes because I haven't thought through it, I haven't validated it, and it's not perfect. So what I talked to her about were things like asking an open question. I'm curious, I'm thinking about this. Help me understand how this would play out. Or here's what I've thought to this point. I'm not sure it's the right thing, but what do you think? I mean, just those simple questions that some of us, when we get into a scenario of, oh my goodness, everybody else isn't saying anything, so what do I say? Those are just simple opening questions. And I guarantee you, if somebody asks a question, somebody else will ask another question. Guarantee it. I think also the people that I want to address the last one as the head of HR, I think is important. If I speak up, there will be retaliation. In 19 years, I have never seen anyone be fired for speaking up. I think it's a myth. It depends on the environment. I understand that. But even in our own organization today, we've had a couple of people who've left. And it's really important as a leader that if you see something like that, rumors are brilliant, right? Yep, look, he's being walked off campus. By the way, we never walk anybody off campus when they've been fired. Doesn't work like that. I have honestly never seen anybody be fired for speaking up. I've seen them be fired for other things, but not speaking up. It is a myth, and it is stopping a lot of people speaking up in situations in a business environment.
I think that what I've seen in the past isn't people getting fired for speaking up, but it's a much more subtle form of retaliation.
Yep.
When there's an opportunity to go to a conference and all of a sudden you're not being considered. So I think that what a lot of people are worried about isn't being fired, it's the fact that their future trajectory will be negatively impacted.
Yep, I'm not going to progress. Yeah, I'm not going to be given a nice project and won't be given opportunities. That's a very true fact. Yeah, I agree that is also part of a retaliation, and it is more subtle.
It's very subtle sometimes.
And one of the things that we've talked to about, I've talked to my team about, and we're specifically talked to leaders about in our organization is, when you see that, what do you say? Because those leaders generally are reporting to somebody, right? So how do you set the expectations and accountability for ensuring that you have a broad enough view of what's going on in your own organization to spot exactly if that is happening? And unfortunately, the reality is that sometimes a manager's manager may be also doing things like that. So it starts from taking a different approach to leadership and ensuring that we reward, promote, and encourage the leaders that don't do that to thrive in our organization, and you take accountability and you deal with leaders who do that, and you actually exit them from the organization versus the person who's speaking up potentially, right? But it is all these subtleties. There is no single right answer. There is no magic button. But being really aware of what's happening around you, and also getting a network of colleagues who you can say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Do you see that or not? No magic bullet. But, and we've started talking about this, but are there other circumstances that you guys have had where you feel really uncomfortable speaking up in your lives? Anybody want to share something? What were the circumstances? What did it feel like, and how did you react? Yeah.
I mean, not getting a chance to speak, and there's an intense discussion going on between 2 or 3 people, and then you feel like you'll be interrupting, or it doesn't really matter because the 2 or 3 people are so into discussion that they have literally forgotten that there are other people around.
How did that make you feel?
I felt like I tried speaking up, and then it was, just let it go. There's no point.
Did you say, did you withdraw?
Like I'm not part of the team.
Yeah.
And that actually affected my work in the future.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing and speaking up. Thank you. Anybody else had any interesting uncomfortableness? It's really uncomfortable talking about uncomfortable things, isn't it? Yeah.
So he just, I felt belittled in my position because he was a manager and I was under. So when I would bring up something or critique something that needed to be fixed around where we're working at, it was very much of no, because you're in a lower position.
Yeah.
And to answer your question on how I felt, I got a write-up.
So you felt, how did you feel about in that situation though? Like, I don't want to be here anymore?
Exactly. Well, I confronted
Good
him
luck.
about it.
Yeah.
We need to change this because me and the rest of my coworkers are feeling like you're belittling us because we're in a lower position than you.
And then it became your problem.
Yeah, he reacted negatively,
Yeah.
saying that I said some things and I got a write-up for it. So,
Fabulous.
yeah.
And you're like, great, I do not want to be here anymore. Totally, right? So think about if you've got the talent in the organization and you treat them like that, why would you stay? If that happened to me, I'm with you. I'm out of there. So if you do nothing, think about if it was me, what would I do? That is my mantra. I am DNA, fairness, equality, and if I wouldn't want it to happen to me, why the hell would you do it to somebody else, right? So be passionate about it and just be logical about it, and it's amazing that there are so many people who have no sense of that. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is if you see something happening, you need to say something. So if you're in a meeting where there's 3 other people there and they're all doing this and they're excluding you, what's your name, sorry? Shreya. If Shreya's there and I'm like here and I'm like, hold on a second, I can see that those 3 are just like, or the 2 are in there. My obligation is to say, hey, Shreya, what do you think? Hey, Shreya, what do you think? Or, hey, this conversation is, we need to just take a step back. Is there anybody else who's got something they want to say? You have to provide an in. Otherwise, nobody will speak up because it's easier if you don't. So provide an in, and you have to be courageous and break in by asking that type of question. And if you see something or you could have spoken up to support somebody and you said, I should have done something about it, next time it happens, do it. They will thank you for it. The organization will thank you for it. You will thank yourself for it, because otherwise I know that if I'm in a situation I don't say something and I go away and go, I wish I'd said something. I wish I'd said something. We might have got a different outcome. We might not have needed 10 more meetings. It slows decision making, it slows innovation, it makes people feel excluded, it's not inclusive, it's not good leadership. So it's just patterns of behaviors that if you start them early, you continue them as a leader, it will create a super inclusive culture that you will become the team, you will become the leader that everybody wants to work with. Just saying as well. So, okay. From a perspective of just some research that was done in 2016 and 2018, so Amy Edmondson, they did a survey, I think it was an article in the New York Times in 2016, and funnily enough, they picked Google. But the most important thing from a success for Google in 2016 was about psychological safety. Interesting, the situation they find themselves in today. But psychological safety was quoted as the #1 important aspect for a high-performing organization such as Google. And all this says is, if you're in different zones of psychological safety, then quality is at times compromised, or you don't put your best work into it. So if you're in the apathy zone, right? So your psychological safety is low, and you don't care about quality. So you're going to show up, your heart's not really in it, you're not going to do a good job, you don't feel safe speaking up, you're never going to speak up, and you're probably going to make mistakes and not do anything. The comfort zone is, hey, I've got high psychological safety, I'm having a great time, but I'm not that interested in quality still. So I'm not going to bring my best to it, but hey, I'm fine. The anxiety zone is the worst zone, I would say, which I think is why it's red. High safety issues and high quality issues, and you have low psychological safety. So if you're in the anxiety zone, you are actually anxious. So you are unlikely to speak up about anything. So the place where we want to go is to the learning zone, which is where you have high psychological safety, high standards, and you're more likely to be in an environment where you feel no longer limited by what you can say or what you can do. So you embrace both sides of your psyche. You feel comfortable and you're giving back everything that you can, and you're happy in what you're doing, and you're challenging and being innovative and creative. I thought that was an easy way of looking at it. In Roche, we've started to talk about agility over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm just going to go through this. And one of the things that I personally believe is inclusion and diversity as a red thread through agility. And the reason I say that is if we think about agility, we talk about value creation, collaboration, and innovation. Agility for us means flexibility. So speed on one side, so you want to be quick, but you don't want to be too quick. You got to balance that with what's your North Star? Where's your stability? What is it we're supposed to be doing? Where are we going? And then also the flexibility on this side. How could we think differently? Roche is a very traditional company that over the last 10 years has learned to be untraditional in many ways. It's super uncomfortable, but it's really exciting. That's all I'm saying. But my thought is, as I look through this, the red thread is diversity and inclusion. And the reason I say that is there are a couple things on the left, right? So you have to have a mindset of contribution. If you don't have a mindset of contribution, you're not going to engage in creating value for the organization. How do you get a mindset of contribution? I would argue it's through engagement, inclusion, being heard, all that sort of thing. Collaboration is key. You heard me say I like to collaborate. It's my #1 favorite thing to do. But again, you've got to get into a partnership mindset. And for Roche, that's really difficult. And one of the biggest things we've tried to think about is how do we partner with our competitors, which is alien, right? Why would you do that? But we've got into a partnership most recently with, in a very specific part of our digital business in diagnostics with GE. I'm like, why the, 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, honestly, a year ago, I would have said, what? Why? But it's a different way of working. We're collaborating with them on a lot of their blood screening issues, and they're collaborating with us on oncology. So how can we make the best of both worlds? It's really interesting. And diversity and inclusion is that red thread, right? If I'm going to say, hey, but you're from the competition, I'm not going to speak to you, I'm not sharing. Now, there are agreements, right? There are firewalls and all that sort of thing. But if you can't partner with your old competition, you probably won't be agile and progress as an organization. And then finally, innovation, and I think we've talked about that. So being open and having a mindset of discovery, I love that. My new role as of Friday, I will be the global head of HR for our pharma research and early development organization, which used to be called drug discovery. And I'm like, why don't we call it discovery again? But the curiosity and the importance of sharing information and data, even within your own organization, particularly from a scientific perspective, will bring great results. It's one of the mindsets we're trying to change is the inclusiveness of bringing everybody in. It's not knowledge is power anymore. That's a bad, bad place to be. So going through that. And then finally, my biggest learning I'd like to leave with you is around what I call leaders need to have their eyes, ears, and minds open. So if you, I went on a program a couple of months ago, last October. It was about how do we bring agility into our organization as leaders. And what's clear to me is pretty brutal. You get some good 360 feedback and all this type of thing. But it's real. And it says, hey, Claire, you've been in this job 19 years. You know if you have this situation, this is the solution that will work. I know it will work. I've done it more than 100 times. But the feedback was, if you always do it that way, then nobody's going to give you an idea of doing it a different way that would have the same result, but would include a new methodology or different people or be less Claire, right? So it's about not, I know it's going to work, I'm going to do this, I know this is the solution. But there's somebody over here who also knows a different way of doing it, and there's somebody over here. So I need my eyes to look this way, and I need my ears open to try something different. And I need that mindset that I know I'm right, and I want to try something different and experiment. And I think the importance of taking that approach, we have leadership commitments, and one of them is about really ensuring that we create a trusting and open environment. And my number one belief in terms of building inclusive environments is you have to create trust. It's much easier for Rui and Frank to speak up in this environment because they know who I am. They trust me, I hope, after 3 years. If you have the trust, thank you for those who did speak up though, but if you have the trust, it's much easier. So building that trust and listening and showing you care, you don't have to agree with everything, is really important. And then develop some leadership, agile behaviors, really foster accountability, experiment, learn fast, and get on with it, move on. Too many people try and try and try. It's like, stop, try something different. That's the biggest thing I've learned in the last 2 years, I would say. If it doesn't work, if it's not going to work, don't spend another 2 years trying to fix it. Try something else. Yes?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So what role does timing have in when not to speak up? Because one thing that I've learned is that your platform has an impact on how your message is perceived. And so you can say something to someone, and somebody else can say it, someone who has a platform, and the message is perceived completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very valid point. I think that you have to. One of the things I encourage people to do is speak up as soon as they think of something, because otherwise you may fall in the risk of the conversation has moved on 10 times, and you're like, oh, hold on, I wish I'd said it back then, and now I'm not going to say it. But I do think that there's situations where you have to be smart and say, okay, am I the best person to say it, or can I get a different stakeholder in a different environment to say it for me? Not sure that answered your question, but we can carry on talking about that if you like. I think the other thing from a leader perspective is really to build, make sure you see the silences, the invisible silences. You have to have your eyes open. Hard being a leader, isn't it? Who'd want to do that? And really build a culture that both rewards and allows experimentation. I'm sure Rui and Frank won't mind me saying, but when I joined the organization, we had a fairly traditional HR team, and we were pretty service-oriented, and we got stuff done, high-performing, but I felt that we weren't getting the most out of people, we weren't getting the ideas we needed. So we took a step back, and we said, hey, how can we do it differently? And so by including different people into different conversations, you may get the impression I'm extremely non-hierarchical. I'm like, come on, Frank, come on, Rui, let's go, or whoever it is. Get other people involved, get them included, and actually reward those people for then trying things that they've never tried before will generally help that inclusion and the experimentation and the ideas. And they'll probably bring things to you that you never thought they would. So you've got to foster and coach that out of people. Okay. So to finalize, speak up or shut up, only one real option, right? You have to speak up. And as leaders, you have to create that environment. So short term, it may be really difficult, really uncomfortable. In the long term, and we've experienced this in our organization in the last couple of years, and in fact, yesterday was another one, but in the long term, if you don't speak up, those problems will become huge. And they will become somewhat, you may be unable to solve them. If you speak up sooner, you can get on with it and try and figure out what it is. And I think great leaders really create that environment. So be open, authentic, and genuine. If you can't do that, then maybe don't step into the shoes as quickly as you think you might, but if you don't try and be somebody else, my biggest thing. I say to Frank and Rui, don't try and be me. For goodness sake, don't try and be me, but be your authentic self, because that will encourage others to be their authentic selves as well, and they'll be heard. Listen more and hear everyone. Some feedback my team gave me when I first arrived was, you listen really well, but there's people over there you are not hearing. So listen and hear everybody. And then really seek and encourage diversity at every opportunity. You have to put effort into it. It doesn't just magically happen. Or it can magically happen, but you're not making the most of it. So the effort required is sometimes challenging, but you can destroy an inclusive culture that you've taken years to cultivate in a second. So work at it, because it will be worth it and the value you'll get from it will be immense. The opportunity that people see, the opportunity to speak up, to bring creative ideas, to bring innovation, and then contribute to the end result of a much more high-performing organization is without question the most important thing you can do as a leader. So with that, I thank you.